Okay, let's get rocking and rolling. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. And again, I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live federal sales training, where I teach process, procedures, tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow the process A to Z, we're going to achieve predictable, repeatable results. And that's what I want for you. I know that's what you want for yourself. And so that's why we bring this training to you. Before we go much further, do me a favor, help buyers remember who you are by putting your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 words to describe what your company sells. Put that in the chat so buyers, me, the others in the community can remember who you are. We can begin to get your core competency and your company name sinking into our memory. And when it comes up somewhere else and somebody says, hey, do you know anybody who does elevator repairs? I know somebody. Do you know anybody who does service now? It's like, well, I know 3 people in the community who do that. And so we want to be able to remember who you are. Also, going along the lines of chat and in the community, grow your network, engage with the people who are inside of the community. These are your peers in the government contracting world. And I'd love for you to be able to meet new people, build relationships that you're able to take outside of this community and help both your companies grow further in the federal market. So engage in the community. And then the last thing is I really want to say thank you to the GovCon Chamber of Commerce's sustaining members. We can't do any of this without you. We really appreciate you being part of the community inside the sustaining membership. So thank you very much. All right, let's get rocking and rolling with today's training on relationships. Okay, today's training, we're going to be talking about how to start and build relationships in the federal market. If you see me do other training, I talk on this topic a lot. I actually talk on it a lot because I feel like there's not as much content and training put out there about the how to build relationships. We're all told that we need to have relationships for success, but there's not as much training on the how, right? There's a lot of training out there that if you want to know how to, shred an RFP and write a proposal, there's a lot of experts on proposal writing who come in and give you a lot of guidance. But I feel like relationship building, which is so vital in government contracting, it just doesn't have as many of us talking about it. And that's why we talk about it a lot. You'll see me constantly talking about it. And today, I'm going to be talking about starting and building relationships, but I'm going to tackle it from a different angle. I'm trying to always tackle a topic from different angles so you can gain more and more knowledge. You can begin to develop those skills. Like I said, we're all told in federal government contracting, right, that we need to have relationships, right? You know that you need to have relationships in the government contracting space. People don't buy from those, people buy from those they know, like, and trust. But if they don't know you, if you don't have a relationship, how can they like and trust you, right? And so starting relationships about getting them to know you and building that relationship will lead to them knowing liking and trusting you. But one of the challenges we have as small businesses is until we get good at it, we don't have relationships. And maybe this is the situation you're in right now, right? Is that you don't have relationships. And the solution for today's training that I want you to keep in mind is that relationship building is a verb, right? Don't wait for it to happen, make it happen. And I got this way of thinking about relationship building from Stephen Covey. Again, I will go back to somebody I felt has shaped a lot of my thinking, my mindset on how to be good at what I do, both in personal and professional life. But Stephen Covey talks about, in his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, at one point he's having a conversation with somebody at a conference, and somehow the conversation switches over to this guy's relationship, and he's talking about how he's struggling at home in his marriage or whatever. Long story short, Stephen Covey says, love is a verb. And the guy goes, no, you don't understand, we're arguing. No, love is a verb. It's like, what? What are you talking about? And what Stephen Covey was trying to tell this guy is you just need to go home and work at it. There's falling in love, which is really just you tripped and you fell in love, right? And then long-term marriages and relationships require effort and activity. And that's what Stephen was trying to say. And I equate that to in the federal space, when we're building relationships with teammates, potential teammates, or buyers, relationship building is a verb. It doesn't just happen and it's done. It's an activity that we have to keep doing. And so that's what I want you to keep in mind as we go through today's training, that relationship building is a verb, just like love. And so in today's training, I'm going to try to cover several different things. I typically try to stick to 3 main topics, but I talk about relationship building is not done in a day. They're built every day. And I'm going to talk to you about what that means. I'm going to talk to you about committing a certain amount of time where you work on a relationship. You don't just try it for a meeting or two and then you're done. So I want you to try for, like, let's say 20 engagements where you work at it, maybe 5 to 20, and we'll talk into that. And then the last thing is, and this is one of the most important things I want you to keep in mind, is knowing how many relationships you need. Your company needs you to build relationships with buyers and with teammates. And today, one of the things I want to share with you is just, how do I determine how many relationships, strategic relationships, am I trying to build? And there's a difference between relationships and people I know. If I go to a conference, I meet a bunch of people, those aren't relationships. Relationships are us working together, coming together and saying, hey, we want to collaborate on what's best for both of us. If it's a buyer, I'm collaborating on their needs and their requirements with my solutions and products, right? If I'm collaborating with a teammate, I might be looking at their needs as it relates to, and mine relating to, where do we want to sell into? Well, we want to go into this agency. We want to go after this opportunity. And so you're looking at it from that angle. Do me a favor, as we go along, if this is making sense, if this is what you are looking for, then just put relationship building is a verb into the chat. Let me see how many of you will put 4 words into the chat. Relationship building is a verb. Participating in Neil's training is a verb. It's an action. This is an action sport we're doing today. Okay, so let's talk. While you're doing that, let's talk about that. Relationship building is a verb. One of the things that I'd like to talk to you about, and I say this with love and respect, but tough love, and it's then we need to quit complaining. And I want to go through some of these things that I hear from people. And frankly, I might have said myself in my last companies, where people tell me, oh, you need to have relationships. That's fine, but I don't know anybody, right? I'm just complaining. And let me do a quick sidebar. Somewhere along the lines in project management, I learned that, we need you to be stating problems so we can find solutions. But if all you're doing is complaining, well, first off, I got my own complaints. But second, there's no solutioning. We're not thinking about, well, what do we do? But if you state a problem, you might be able to take a complaint by turn it into a problem by just putting one word at the end. So I'm going to talk to you about some complaints I hear and some complaints you might be, thinking when you hear people like me say, you need to have relationships with agencies or strategic partners. I don't know anyone. Just put the word yet at the end, right? I don't know anyone. Yet means now you've turned it into a problem. And the solution is, well, how do I meet people? And we'll talk more about that, right? Another complaint that I hear is I can't meet anyone. So I don't know anyone, is I don't have any relationships yet. I can't meet anyone. I'm trying to get into CDC or this agency or DHS and I can't meet anyone yet, right? At some point when you get what I'm saying, put yet in the chat. Another complaint that I hear is no one calls me back, right? So you might call and leave a voicemail over and over again with different people within the government. You might download our small business specialist directory and try to call a bunch of these folks and they're not calling you back. Well, no one calls me back yet. And when I say yet, what I'm going to mean is, well, how do I get them to call me back? And I have training, that's separate training on that we make Gus, if he's feeling energetic, and put it in. Otherwise, you can find it in our replays. But no one calls me back, right? Do you feel like no one's calling you back? Well, they're just not calling you back yet. Similar to not calling you back is no one's emailing me. No one's responding to my emails. I send out blast emails, which we all kind of know is wrong or not as effective. I send out really targeted emails, but still no one's responding to my emails. No one's responding to my emails yet, right? And the last one here is people, they do reach somebody. I have a first call, we do a meeting, but it goes nowhere. So I'm able to reach people, but it goes nowhere yet. How do I turn that first call that seemed like it was great, but then it doesn't go anywhere? How do I make it go somewhere? And so when you think about, I have a first call, but it goes nowhere yet, then you're lining that up as a problem statement, and we want to figure out a solution statement to it. I want to give you a couple of quick examples. Depending on how long I talk, I'll decide whether it's quick. Of people where you have great calls and it doesn't go anywhere, and kind of how we turn it around. And one is actually with Gus. He and I worked together a couple of years ago, pushing into DLA. And so he was going into DLA. I was on the outside, kind of pure business developing with him or something. But he was the lead going in there, making the calls on his own. And he would reach small business specialists who would kind of blow him off. They're like, oh, that's somebody else, or we got that all covered. It's like, wait a minute. And what he was trying to do is just go in and learn about the agency. but they weren't even taking the time to listen to them and to move that meeting forward. And so when he came back and we were brainstorming about it, I said, we just need to go back and say, this is all the stuff we've read. This is what you told us. This is what we're trying to learn. Can we have another conversation? And what I told him was, that person is on your list for importance to your company that you want to get into. Well, then you need to call them back. And so they kind of blew them off in the beginning. They had a call. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes small business specialists won't listen to you. They'll just tell you everything you need to do. You need to register in SAM. You need to have a bank account. You need to tie your shoes so you don't trip. They'll tell you all these things as if you've never been in business before. And they don't listen for a second. But getting them to listen is not something that can happen instantly just by you waving a line. You have to come back and give them a reason to listen. And in that scenario, what I want you to keep in mind is, don't give up, right? No one's moving me past that first call yet. And when we looked at yet, we said, well, how can we go back? I had the same situation with a customer who talked about, they had a meeting with somebody else that we had referred them to. And they said, the meeting was good. We talked and we were going to, we talked about potentially working together in the future in different areas. I'm like, stop. That's just a phone call. Even though they liked each other, everybody was nice, et cetera. But they didn't schedule a follow-on meeting. They didn't sit there and say, well, why would we get together? And so my customer initial thoughts was, well, it was a good call. I'll wait for them to call back. Or if I have an opportunity, I'll go back. And what I said is, no, you want to be able to go back and give them and guide them along into that relationship. Let them know that you really do want to have a strategic relationship with them. You really do want to uncover whether it could be good for both companies. Initially, we think it can be good. What can we do? Right. And so if we have good calls, but it doesn't really go anywhere, well, then give the other party a way to take it forward. And so for this customer, what I suggested is to just reach back and say, hey, I thought it was awesome. Here's the action items, what we talked about. Let's connect again in 2 weeks, if that works for you, in 2 weeks. And what I'd like to do is to show you a couple of opportunities I'm tracking that I think you might be really interested in. Don't ask them for anything. Just kind of go in. And then when you get in, this is a whole nother training, but when you get in, then you can say, here's my expectations of you. But you need to kind of take charge of that relationship compared to just complaining, right? Anytime you feel yourself complaining, and sometimes I find myself complaining, right? It's not an unusual thing. But fortunately, I got 9-year-old sons who I teach lessons to who turn around and shove it right back in my face. They're like, if I say, something's not done, they're like, yeah, Dad. And that's all I want you to take away. It's like, yeah, keep in mind, you can turn a complaint into a problem statement by putting yet at the end. So that's a big part of what I want you to understand is that when I talk about relationship building as a verb, think about putting yet at the end and it turns it into a verb. Okay, so let's talk about how to start, right? How to get started. Today's training is about starting and building relationships in the federal space. And what I want to talk to you today, there's many ways to get started. And I just want to talk about one in particular to get you rolling is you need to know your numbers, right? Strategic relationships in your business should not be accidental. They should not be something that just happens. You go to an event, you're like, oh, hey, I got 20 cards. I'm going to start relationships. Why? What? Who are those people that you got cards from? Were they strategic? I was talking to a customer yesterday who's going to a conference and we're creating a strategy around her, what she would be doing there. And I said, hey, one of the things I would recommend you do is don't waste your time trying to teach them all about your business. They're learning about hundreds of people's business, at a big conference, and they won't remember. What you really want to do is to seek out the relationships that you want, get in there, get their contact information and say, can we schedule a follow-on call? By doing that, you're able to schedule a meeting. But she needed to know, who does she want to meet? There was many agencies there. Don't meet them all. You've got a certain set that you're trying to go after. Get in there and get that information right away. And so I want you to know your numbers, and I'm going to guide you down a few numbers that you should be paying attention to. So if you got a notepad and a pencil, you'll want to write this down. But when you think about knowing your numbers, these are the type of people I want you to keep in mind. So the first one is, in no particular order, but the first one is 7 mentors. I did a whole training on it. I've written blogs about the 7 mentors. These are your the 7 mentors that are available to small businesses out there. You can think of them as your informal board of advisors, but they're folks like the SBDC, the PTAX, who are now changing their name, the PCR, the Small Business Professional, the Women Business Center, Veteran Business Center, and whoever else is in there. Go read the article. But these 7 mentors, right? Some people will be great at that job. Some people will be less great at that job, but you should have a relationship with all of them. If they're not that great at the job, teach them to be great at that job by coming back with specific questions. And this goes back to relationships are not built in a day, right? You don't go in and judge that mentor, that PTAC counselor, for example, in one day, one meeting. They don't know what they're talking about, which is exactly what I did in my last company, which is the stupidest thing I could have done, right? I'm like, I know so much more what I'm doing. They're just a counselor. And it wasn't until I came out that I realized how, again, dumb I was and how much I should have been working with them on the relationship and do what they say and begin to move forward. Anna Ehrman, who used to run the Virginia PTAC, had a great piece of advice that, if you do one thing that the PTACs tell you, then just do that thing, right? If she had one piece of advice for us, just do what we say. And I was, too good for the 7 mentors. But when I come out, I see how powerful they are. They can give me guidance. They can talk to me about proposals, perhaps, or RFPs. They can make introductions to larges, to smalls, and to agency buyers. They're fantastic. It just takes time to build relationships so they can understand you. So these are 7 mentors. First thing I want you to keep in mind is, that's one number you want to track. The second one is larges. How many larges should you know? When I give advice on reaching out to large firms, and this typically is for companies that are doing, let's say, $1 million or more, right? Larges have a certain criteria of what they want from smalls to work with you. But when you're at a stage where you can work with larges, you really want to be building a relationship with 8 large companies. And these companies should all be within the same target agency. If you've got 4 that are just spot on and they're really weaving you into their work, then reduce it down from 8 to 4. The key is when you have 8, you can manage those relationships throughout the year. And I talk about how do you manage relationships, right? It seems overwhelming, but it really is not. If you have just a 15-minute, maybe 30-minute, but 15-minute meeting every 2 weeks, you can manage all these relationships. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But and no, I'm not sharing the slides. But so larges, you want to have these relationships with ones that are in your target agency. And then small businesses, right? You want to target hub zones. You want to have a couple of relationships with hub zone firms, a couple of relationships with women-owned small business firms, a couple of relationships with 8A firms, and a couple of relationships with service disabled veteran owned. Even if you're one of those designations, you want to have 2 to 4 relationships with each one of those categories. And here's why. If you're going after a set aside, something comes out on woman-owned small business, but you're not a woman-owned small business, and you want to respond to an RFI or whatever to get it pushed to a woman-owned small business, or you want to go after an opportunity that's on a woman-owned small business set aside, then you want to have these relationships in place. You don't want to be coming and knocking on the door of a woman-owned small business and say, hey, there's a set aside, can we get together? They're going to look at you and say, well, I'm not sure who you are. Who are you? What do you do? I don't know if you write proposals well. I don't know if you're going to do the work well for the customer. I don't know anything about you because we haven't developed a relationship. And so I want you building these relationships steadily. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But by identifying these 4 different categories of small businesses, that opportunities might come out as a set aside, SDVO or 8A, for example. By having those relationships in place, you and they have begun to get a rhythm for working together, even if it's just getting together every couple of weeks and talking about potential opportunities to work together. And the last group of first group is vehicles. Look at the contract vehicles that are in your target agency. So let's say Oasis in the Air Force as an example. Well, then go build a relationship with 3 or 4 contract holders for that contract vehicle. That way, just like the set asides, if something is put on a particular contract vehicle that you're not on, you have access to it. You don't just have access through one partner who might bail on you at the last minute, which happens all the time, just because they no bid it. No bad things there, but they might no bid it. Well, if you have multiple relationships, you can access that opportunity that's on Oasis as an example. So contract vehicles, just restating it, 7 mentors, larges, vehicles, hub zones, women-owned small businesses, SDVOs, and 8As. So as we go forward, if this is making sense what I'm saying, just put know your numbers, know my numbers in the chat. So 2 other groups of people that you want to pay attention to on knowing your numbers. And when I say knowing your numbers, let me just remind you, what I mean is actually how many relationships am I trying to build? So with the ones I just did, I'm giving you a number, right? Like let's say 4 for each one of these. As you move forward, think about business development and capture. So you're looking at relationships from a little bit different angle. So business development, you want to be thinking about, in my opinion, this is what you want for business development. And just so I tell you what business development is, it's about getting in and learning an agency, finding and building relationships and identifying opportunities. Business development basically leads to capture, which is a single opportunity trying to bring it home, right? And so you want to find in business development what I call FRs, focuses of receptivity. These are people who are willing to navigate you through their office, their command, make introductions. They may or may not be able to be part of an opportunity you're going after. They can fit any job title, but their focuses of receptivity, meaning they're willing to guide you. And so you want to find one in your primary agency. If you're going after the Navy and you pick a particular command, like let's say NAVC, then you want to find an FR, a focus of receptivity, in there, at least one. If you're going to be going after the Navy, going after NAVC, and maybe you're going after Crane and Dahlgren, then you might take that down and say, well, let me have a FR, a focus of receptivity at Dahlgren, and a focus of receptivity at Crane, Indiana, right? These are two different places. The person in Dahlgren's not going to really be able to help you over in Crane, but by having those focuses of receptivity, they can help you navigate throughout their organization. I have a focus of receptivity at Crane, who's a small business specialist, who's more than willing to introduce me to the CTO or to large primes, right? I mean, they have done this. And so that's a great example of a focus of receptivity. They teach me, and then they're willing to make introductions. The last one on business development is a PCR. This is one of the 7 mentors, but I put them down here in business development as well. Procurement center representatives are employees for the SBA, but they have oversight over an agency. So if I'm looking at NAVC, or if I'm looking at Crane, Indiana for NAVC, I would find the PCR, that procurement center representative, who has oversight, and begin to build a relationship with them. I want that relationship in place because they hear about opportunities. So you're trying to increase that. Again, BD is about trying to find opportunities. You can find a list of PCRs and the 7 mentors, et cetera. You can find them on our website, www.govconchamber.com. And in there, it's got, we have the small business specialist director, and the 7 mentors are in there. And I think it includes PCRs. Gus, just let me know if that's right. And the last one is capture. So from knowing your numbers, when you're thinking about capture is about one opportunity. And so you need to know, who am I trying to build relationships with? Because sometimes that capture activity takes 6 to 24 months. You could start a relationship and begin to build it pretty good while it's still in the pre-RFP phase, which means theoretically the government is talking to you. So begin to find the eval team, right? This is basically the program office, but begin to understand who's going to be on the eval team. You want to start building as many of those relationships as you can. There's a reason large primes hire captains who come out of the Navy and send them back in, is because they have all these relationships already. And they can come back in and say, hey, Jane, I know you guys are coming out with that thing. Can we talk about it? And they're able to bring Booz Allen in easily. For us smalls, it's a little harder, right? Because we're not going to go hire somebody who just retired out of the military to go back into the military. But you can build relationships. You can learn this from another capture relationship you want to develop, which is the small business specialist. That small business specialist theoretically knows about the opportunities you're going after, and they can guide you. This goes back to a focus of receptivity, right? They can guide you through that command, that program office, maybe that has something. And then obviously in capture, when you think about relationships, you want to develop a relationship with the KO and the contracting office specialist. These are the 2 people who are going to lead that acquisition. It might take you a while to build that relationship. I have separate training on how do you build it? How do you get them to start talking to you? But this slide is about just knowing your numbers. So again, put knowing your numbers into the chat if you haven't done that already, to let me know you got it. And I got 4 minutes to get this last slide, which is an important one to me, but I can go pretty fast because I think you'll get it. It's about relationships. Relationships are built every day, right? They aren't built in a day. Rome was built in a day. Relationships are built every day, going back to that relationship building as a verb. And so as you go forward, think win-win. One of the best ways to build a relationship is not only to be thinking about what's best for them, but think about what's best for you, because then both of you have this winning relationship that you're feeding off each other. An important part of relationship building activity every day is to block time, right? You want to block time every single day for relationship building. You've got to determine how much time you have, right? But you want to block time for new calls. I recommend 5 calls a day, for example, which take you 15 minutes. And you want to block time for regular meetings, right? Every day I want to have one meeting that's related to a relationship, wherever that relationship is, with large prime, small teaming partners, or federal agency buyers. But you want to block time. If you don't block time, you're not going to do it. So if you see the value of blocking time to get something done, put block time into the chat. I want you to block time. That's how you start relationships. That's how you will build relationships, is by committing to it. The last thing on this, as it relates to relationships are built every day and why you want to be doing something every day, is you don't want to let relationships go stagnant. Sometimes we go beyond the starting a relationship, and then we kind of lose touch. And the idea is, the farther you go away from when you last talked to a person or truly engaged in a relationship, the less strong that relationship is. And at some point, you're really going to need that relationship. And if it's not strong, they won't be as responsive to you. Not in any kind of mean way, but maybe they got other relationships that are strong. You want to be at the forefront of your most important strategic relationships. You don't need a ton of relationships, right? You want to have a bunch of people you know and know of you, but the strategic relationships, that's a small number, relatively speaking, right? 20, 30 people or something. And so you want to build that relationship down. Okay, so we talked about 3 things, and I want to give you one walk-away tip. We talked about relationship building as a verb. Keep that in mind, just like love. Relationships, I want you to know how many you need, because there's no point in trying to pick up the phone and call all these people if you don't know what your goal is. So have a goal for how many relationships you're trying to establish, and then build them every single day, right? Remember that they're built in a day. I mean, they're built every day, not in a day. So as you go forward, take a few minutes, determine the numbers, your numbers, right? This is the action item for you. As you prepare for 2023, how many relationships do you need? Ask yourself that as you go forward, and I think you'll be able to take this training into and put it into action. Hey, if you'd like to work with me and my team, we have a business development accelerator workshop. We'd love to have you in it. If your company is at the right stage, that usually is $1 million+ in revenue already. If you want to learn more, do me a favor, just reach out in LinkedIn and direct messaging. And the last thing is, I really want you to remember that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.